One of the reasons why experts don't get booked quickly is they're not approaching it strategically. They're doing a spray and pray method. They're leaning on booking agencies and their VAs to try and get them booked on shows. But if they're not strategic, they're most likely using an approach that's outdated or falling flat. And so they're investing time and energy in something that cannot produce aligned visibility in the long run. You are listening to Amplify Your Success Podcast, episode 433. And today I'm going to take you through how to find your next 10 guest expert appearances without paying for expensive booking services. You ready for this? Let's get started. Welcome to the Amplify Your Success Podcast. Get ready to ramp up your revenue, amplify your impact, and make your mark in the world. This is the show for experts, thought leaders, and service professionals who want to shatter their limits and achieve that next level. You're going to find out from other experts and influencers how they made it. Now, let's get amplified. Hey there, inspired entrepreneurs and business leaders. It's your host, Melanie Benson, and I'm an authority amplifier for guest experts just like you who want to leverage their message and visibility to get in front of the right audiences to propel their business forward. And I've been doing this for a very long time. And one of the things that I know is that podcast guesting is one of my favorite strategies. It's one of my proven approaches to not just ramping up my visibility and building buzz and momentum around my work, but actually attracting ideal clients. And I get asked this question all the time. So, Melanie, how do I find podcast guesting experiences? How do I find the right audiences without spending a fortune on booking agencies? So we're going to unpack this today. And I want you to imagine for a minute that you can get your next 10 guest expert appearances. They're right under your nose. They're hiding in plain sight. And you don't actually have to pay a dime for a booking service. What would shift right now for you? So I personally have never, ever invested in a booking agency. I've tested a couple of matchmaking services, which I didn't stay with for very long because partly I wanted to know what was the experience that I would give a client if I referred them that direction. And there's some great ones out there, don't get me wrong. But what I've noticed is the appearances that move the needle for me, that get me the best results, are the ones that come from the strategy I'm going to outline for you today. And I work with a lot of experts that go through my Authority Accelerator program and end up staying in our visibility sprint to help them get booked. And one of the things that happens is when they use this process that I outlined, they get higher quality bookings, they get aligned audiences, and they get in front of people who are ideal clients. And something that I'll share with you a little bit more, this visibility multiplier effect kicks in, where they get on a few bookings, and a few visibility appearances, and then it starts to do the work for them. So this process isn't about luck. It's not about kind of like people finding you per se. That might happen some. It's not about spending a ton of money and even spending a bunch of time getting in front of new audiences. This is about a very specific strategy that when you dial this in and you use this process over and over again, you should be able to get invitations and opportunities that get you in front of your aligned audiences where potential buyers and potential clients are active. And if you've designed your magnetic talk properly and you know how to build a golden thread, actually brings high value clients to you. It's all about the strategy. So I want to first talk about a few myths that I recognize, and I see people like commenting on social media and sharing kind of like what they're looking for, and I don't want to say I cringe, but I'm always like scratching my head, going, "Oh, yes, that's not going to work for you." One of them is that you need to be everywhere to build buzz. And here's how this kind of unfolds. And I see this happen a lot on the new platform Threads. Somebody said, or actually, there's a lot of groups where people talk about, hey, I want to get on more podcasts. And what it looks like is I want to get more podcast appearances, or I want to be a guest expert. Do you have a podcast I could be on? All right. So if you're listening right now and you know what was wrong with that statement, shout it out in the comments. Let me give you the spoiler here. Being everywhere is not the solution. Being strategically visible is what moves the needle. And what happens for a lot of people is they're like, I'll just be on any podcast. And what that leads to is overwhelm, exhaustion, burnout, frustration, disillusionment. It's not working for me. I one time had a lady, I had given a presentation in a membership area or membership program, somebody's membership program. She heard it. Which is another great payoff of being on the right podcast, is it leads to many other bookings. And she said, Melanie, like, I really resonate with this. Like, I've been told I should do podcast guesting, but I'm not getting any results. And what I unpacked with her is we looked at all of the shows that she'd been visible on, and none of them were aligned for her audience. And so a simple audience recalibration was massively helpful for her. And she started to see real qualified leads coming in, just simply shifting her approach to what shows she got on. So you don't need to be everywhere to build buzz. You don't need to be everywhere to see success. You need to be strategically visible. Second myth, I have a lot of credibility, or I have brand celebrity. People should know my name. I should be able to get booked fast. Well, not so fast. Here's what I see happening. And this isn't across the board. There's still a lot of people that appreciate and value kind of celebrity energy on their show. But if you are going for top shows, there's usually some kind of collaborative approach or a pay to play model. And it's true that a lot of the bigger high profile podcasts these days are wanting people to pay for the exposure they're creating for them. For instance, John Lee Dumas's Entrepreneur on Fire, I think his first couple of years, it wasn't that way. But then he started to see, oh my gosh, I've built a massive following with my listener base, and I'm giving this for people to free. I'm paying all the money to produce the show. And so he moved to more of a pay to play model, or strategically, there's a lot of visibility. Quick side note, I've been on a show twice. I never paid for any of that exposure, but I have something that he values. And there's a lot of like relationship credibility there. Now, the idea that I should be able to lean on my name erodes at this one point, and that is many show hosts recognize big name brand celebrities aren't going to cross promote the show. So that's not a guarantee that you're going to get booked. And so that's where that myth get in your way, is if you're leaning on your brand cred, you may actually find it's not going to work as much. It might work against you. But there is a way to reposition it to kind of get those bookings. Let's talk about the pay to play. I know a lot of people have the myth that like all the big shows, all the popular shows are going to make me pay to be on them. Maybe. I will admit a lot of them are. And a lot of them, a lot of big name or podcasts that pitch you to be on their show, they're using it as a lead generator. And that doesn't necessarily mean they've got a great show that's going to get you an exposure. It's literally just a way to get a conversation to get you into their funnel. And again, it's not a bad thing, just you need to know what you're getting. So one of the things that we're going to talk about in this episode is how to counteract the pay-to-play model. I have never paid for exposure on a show. Most of my clients are not paying for exposure. There's some of them who's like, hey, if it's the right show, I'm open to it. But I've never had any of my clients pay through our work to get on a show. Another one, I need a booking agency to get on great shows. Now, this isn't necessarily a myth, because here's the value of getting someone else to book you or pitch you on shows, is you're leaning on their relationships. But here's what you need to know if you're going towards the agency model or the matchmaking services is you don't always know how well those agencies are vetting the opportunities before they send them your way. And as a host who gets pitched at least 100 times a week, I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt that many of these pitches are just spray and pray. They're like, I hope we get somebody to say yes. And they just go through a really big list of shows and say, what's going to work? What you need is an agency, or if you're an authority accelerator graduate, that you actually have somebody who leans on relationships and they understand how to vet the opportunities properly to get you in front of the right show. So it's not a full myth, but it can be crippling if you're wanting to get a better ROI. And a lot of times hosts don't even book anybody who comes through a PR agent or a booking service because, I know this is going to be generalizing, but it happens a lot. They're not the best guests. They have not been taught how to show up and deliver massive value and what to do to be a great guest. So they're just on this massive tour, snapping up every visibility opportunity they can get. And so, unfortunately, a lot of the PR agencies and booking agencies that kind of got a bad rap, if you're a collaborative podcast like I am, and you want people to collaborate with you to bring, to kind of cross promote the show. So booking agency is not necessarily your fast path to getting on the best shows. So actually, let's get to the last myth. And the last myth is, do I really have a message that a podcast would want? And what happens a lot of times is, without the strategy, you and or your VA are pitching all kinds of shows, and the VA doesn't really know what they're doing, and or you don't really have all your stuff nailed down, and you're just hoping somebody says yes. And what you're doing is you're pitching topics that don't land well or don't have relevance. It's obvious you haven't researched the show. I know this one because I did this one early on. I was like, oh, now that I know better, like I really messed that one up. And what you need to do, again, going back to strategies, you need to make sure you really have your topic and a compelling pitch and or a compelling way to approach these show hosts so that you get the bookings up and the ghosting down. So what I have found over and over and over again is everybody understands I need to be visible. And here's why you need to be visible. This is a strategic visibility strategy that can ensure that your message, I should say, is in front of new audiences. And why is this valuable? Here's some hard stats from different stats gathering companies about why podcast guesting and being on shows can perform at a much higher level than the random social media exposure, or even sometimes from being a expert in virtual summits, in these collaborations, like toolkit giveaways and things like that. The listener growth from 2023 and beyond is staggering. Now, some of these stats do incorporate things like true crime podcasts and like celebrity podcasts, but I find this to be pretty solid across the board in many of the expert-based podcasts as well. In 2023 alone, approximately 70 million people in the US listen to podcasts. This is also growing exponentially in places like Australia and Asia, Europe, right? And it's not quite at the same level as listener growth in the US, but it's still tracking with Canada and many other countries where podcasting is becoming more and more popular. So get this, 70 million people in 2023. It went up in 2024, are listening to podcasts. Nearly 46% of weekly podcast listeners have purchased a product or service after hearing from an expert or advertisement on a podcast. That was for Riverside FM. And the number of listeners in the US is projected to exceed 110 million by 2029. So let's just break this down to why is this really helpful for you? Let's imagine that a show even had a listener base of 50 to 100 people. And you've done your strategic alignment to make sure you're on shows and podcasts that speak to your unique ideal client. If there's 50 to 100 people that listen, and 46% of them could potentially be a buyer, that's 25 to 50 buyers. Okay. And at best case scenario, let's say it's a 20% conversion, people that actually get on your list. Okay. So at a minimum, let's say 20 to 30 of those people get on your list. You now have 20 to 30 new leads that could potentially say yes if you've done your monetization strategy properly and you've developed the back end of how you guide that potential client into a purchase and you nurture that relationship. That's why this is so hot. Now, if you got a really good podcast that's getting 200 to 500 or 1,000 downloads per episode, then you do the math and you can see that this is where a lot of aligned clients can come from. This is how you can build your own audience. And if you start to use the visibility multiplier effect, this is how you're going to catapult the number of guest appearances that can continue to build your business for you. One of the things that happens that you cannot create in social media that happens in these interviews, in this kind of exposure, is there is a depth of rapport and connection that can be cultivated when you're a guest expert. You're borrowing the influence and the credibility from the host. They're showcasing you. And if you know how to really carry the conversation and you become an expert at how you navigate building a golden thread in that conversation and doing it very naturally, organically, and authentically, you have built connection. And that connection guides people to want more from you. You can't do that in that fleeting 15-second reel the same way. That's more of like a hit and miss. But if you really know how to cultivate that conversation well, you are literally nurturing a lead before they ever get into your audience. And it's very powerful what rapport gets built with somebody. So I am a firm believer you need to be really leveraging these kind of guest appearances. But let's talk about what it takes to get those 10 episodes, or sorry, those 10 podcasts booked. Let's start first with the mindset shift. It's not about chasing exposure. It's not about chasing all the podcasts. It's about finding the right audiences. And that means you need to deeply understand who your audience is and the value you can bring to them. I call this value mapping. And you need to be able to say, okay, here's my expertise. And how is that going to bring power and something of value to that audience? Then you have to create a compelling topic. I spend an entire day helping people develop a topic and really like understanding how to build a golden thread in my 30 Accelerator program, because this is so powerful and important. This one thing makes or breaks whether or not you're going to get your next 10 showcases or even your next one showcase. If you don't have the right topics, you're invisible to the host and you're probably not getting listened to. So, aligned audience, compelling topic. And now you need to understand that you have to have a way to stand out to them. So here's what you need to be doing. You need to be visible rather than invisible. You need to be unignorable instead of overlooked. And that's in your control. I've actually, before we started doing booking services for our clients, we actually referred a few clients out to other booking agencies. And one of them invested like $8,000 and got only a couple of bookings. And the reason was, and this is something we had addressed with this client, but he hadn't had enough time to do it, he did not have a platform. You need to have a platform. So one of the ways that you can up your chances of getting booked is having cultivated a presence on at least one social media platform. And part of that is anytime you are being interviewed, you need to share it. Part of that is you sharing your own content. So here's one of the little secrets of me and how I've gotten so much exposure without ever spending a dime on booking agencies or pay to play. I literally have a regular, consistent presence with a compelling message and my topics loud and clear. And what happens when you do that is people who are looking to book somebody are searching online often for guests. And when they see that, they will lean into you and invite you to be on their show. And secondly, if somebody that you have pitched is going to vet you, which almost all of them do, they're going to go look at your presence and say, does this person have consistency of message? Do they have a brand that's aligned with my audience? And do they share the show? So you can actually up your chances of getting that next booking on a popular show by cultivating and deepening your content and your brand alignment on at least one social media platform. Okay, you don't have to do it everywhere, but it's really helpful to do it in at least one place and grow your listener base. I have an entire segment I do with my clients on this because it's been such a value for me. And I know how valuable it is when I'm evaluating whether or not a client or a guest is coming on my show. Now, another thing that happens from all this is relationships. So podcasting has become a very relationship-based industry. And I think this is one of the reasons why many of my clients are getting on more popular shows is because I've cultivated a relationship with many podcasters that perhaps they don't have the time or the access to those same relationships. So they kind of get a shortcut. But if you do want to do the heavy lifting on your own, then relationships matter. And so you need to be looking at how can you cultivate relationships with people who are building platforms that you can borrow and or collaborate with. And I think having a network of people who are actively putting content out like this shortens your path to being a guest on their show. Now, if you don't have those relationships, again, that can be where a booking agency can come in. That, or if you go through Authority Accelerator at some point, you'll see that. And I'll tell you something really exciting. I'm doing an event once a year now called Visibility Velocity. This is coming up in a couple of weeks. I'll tell you more about it at the end of the episode. And this is another way to develop and kickstart those relationships and getting in front of coveted podcaster or show host relationships. Now, last, let's talk about how to open doors when the doors are not already open. So again, you could attend events like Visibility Velocity. You can build relationships, join masterminds, get in coaching groups, right? Like a lot of that works. But one thing that is undervalued and understood, if you will, is the value of connecting with people on their social media platforms. Most show hosts are active on at least one social media platform. Well, go do some heavy lifting and connect with them, engage with them, build a relationship with them, get active commenting on their posts, but follow them. It blows my mind the number of people who pitch me on social media but don't even bother to follow me. Like, that's not doing you any favors. So, put your part in. Now, let's talk about what it takes to stop being overlooked and start getting booked. Okay. If you're going after a big name podcast, something in the top 5% on Listen Notes, then there's some important things that you need to do. One of which is you need to be able to collaborate with them. You need to be able to bring value. You need to be known for your specialty. Now, of course, you can use a booking agency and maybe get past some of that, but keep in mind that visibility multiplier effect only works if you are getting in the right audiences and using the whole process to build and develop visibility where other show hosts are looking for content, looking for guests. So if you're sharing regularly when you are getting appearances or sharing your own content, that helps. But what really moves the needle is when you step in and claim your authority, your specialty, your expertise. Okay. A lot of show hosts, that's very attractive. Even if you're doing something casual like a conversation, because that's a really popular, just having like a conversation about your journey, that's a popular type of podcast these days. But when you're known for something, when you kind of bring that brand presence of like, this is somebody who really knows their stuff, your attraction factor goes up quite a bit. But the collaboration is also something I think often overlooked. And what does that mean to be collaborative? There's two levels of collaboration. One is, how can I add value to that show host that's not just I'm bringing a great topic? What can you do? Do you have an audience that you could share it to? Do you have other people you can introduce them to? How can you be of value to them beyond just delivering a conversation that's going to move the needle for their audience? That's great, but it's not enough always. But if you really want to up the game, if you really want to have that collaboration potential bring in a slew of opportunities, then create a valuable platform where you can initiate the collaboration. I know it's a lot more work, but there's a lot of ways to do it. You don't necessarily have to start an official podcast and do all the things that we do with Amplify Your Success. But if you have a way to say, hey, I'd love to interview you for my show, or I'd love to feature you in my blog, or whatever platform you're going to do, I have a podcast and I'd love to interview you, and you can initiate, your chances of landing those popular shows go up by 60%. And that's how I often kickstarted my buzz and momentum around my brand. Is I created my own platforms. I host a podcast, I host events, and I have opportunities that I can invite people to. So I'm not expecting them to do all the heavy lifting. I'm not expecting them to bring all of the value. I'm co-creating value with them. And I'm not going to wait for them to invite me. I'm always willing to invite them first. And that creates so much more momentum. It kind of activates that law of reciprocity. And it gives, you an edge when people are looking at a lot of different guests coming their way. When you can showcase, here's what I can bring to you. I can invite you on my show. I've got 20,000 followers on Instagram or LinkedIn. Hey, I'd even be willing to do a little live conversation when the episode's airing to spotlight your episode. I'll share it, right? What are you going to do to co-create listener base for that episode? That's what moves the needle in a big way. So if you've been waiting for opportunities to come your way, or you've been delegating this to your VA or booking agency and you're wondering why it's not working, you don't have to be on thousands of episodes a month. You don't have to be on hundreds of episodes. You need to be strategically visible on the right episodes. And all you need is 10, maybe 20, and you can have massive results. But it's about being in front of the right audiences with the right message, and really knowing how to build that golden thread between interest to being intrigued, keeping them listening, to having them invested, to wanting more from you at the end. And that's a strategy, and that's something you can learn. And that's what we do in Authority Accelerator. So if that's really speaking to you, then I'll link up the Authority Accelerator program in the show notes, and you can check that out and see if it's right for you. Now, I mentioned visibility velocity. If you are looking to really ramp up your visibility strategically, and you want your visibility to get a massive ROI, basically you want to monetize your message by being in front of other people's audiences, definitely come to Visibility Velocity. You can attend absolutely free during the live segment. And if you go to visibilityvelocity.com, you will get your invitation to join. If it's over already, then what I would recommend is getting a copy of my 17 mistakes that guest experts make that cost them the lead and the client. I'll also link that up in the show notes. And let's get you absolutely dialed in with your strategy so you can start benefiting from the visibility that gets you in front of ideal audiences and tremendously powerful client attraction system. All right, I'd love to hear your takeaways from today. Wherever you're listening today, give me a little shout out and let me know what you learned from today. Thanks for tuning in today, Amplifier. We're going to keep this conversation going, and I want to hear from you how you're going to amplify your authority and make a greater impact. Before you go, please take a minute to give our show and our guests some love over on your favorite podcasting platform. Subscribe, rate, and review. Leave your full name, and I'll spotlight you and your authority on social media.